Welcome to Newsmax Now. Another big news day here, and as always, a lot to talk about. We'll dive right into the latest on the gun debate. North Korea's planned historic meetings with South Korea and the U.S. as they apparently are ramping up a nuclear reactor. And President Trump taking on multi-billionaire Jeff Bezos and Amazon. But we begin in Ohio, where the president touted his new $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan before a crowd of American workers.
Pouring back plants and factories, pouring back into our country. They can't come back fast enough. Even if you look, Apple going to invest $350 billion. So many others coming back with massive amounts of money. They all want to be back in the USA. A lot of them left. They're coming back.
All right, before we get into it, we want to remind you that we want you to weigh in on all of these headlines as well. The phone lines are open and we're taking your calls. The number is 877-NEWSMAX. That's 877-639-7629. You can also comment on our Facebook and Twitter pages or at newsmax.com. Well, joining me for the full hour is Tom Borelli. He is a contributor at the Conservative Review and here at newsmax.com. We are also excited to bring in Bren Herrera. She is going to be our liberal commentator, our voice from the other side of the aisle throughout the hour. So we're glad to be having you and joining us from D.C. Thank you, Bren.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just dive right into the response to this infrastructure plan. The president introduced it in February. This is more of a formalized version. We're looking at $200 billion in federal money, the rest of that over the decade being picked up by federal and local governments. Tom, let's go to you first. This is a big announcement, but Congress is going to have to pick something up and would eventually have to pass any plan. What's the likelihood of that happening, especially in a year where there are midterm elections?
That's a great question. It's likely not to happen this year. And the way I view this as the start of the 2018 midterm election cycle. President Trump is at his very best when he's out there with the hardworking men and women of America. That's why he is in Ohio. And you have to remember that he's going to use this, as the Democrats are not going to go for this infrastructure plan, just like they didn't go for tax reform, just like they didn't go for any kind of reform for DACA. And he's going to use the three no, no, no going forward into the 2018 midterm elections, try to boost Republicans and reminding people in those key swing districts that Republicans will be the way for economic prosperity.
Yeah, and Bren, actually, I'd love to go to you and get your thoughts on that, because infrastructure has traditionally been something that there seems to be more bipartisanship on, at least, than other issues. And is this something that Democrats maybe would have hoped to be able to take back to their districts leading up to November to say, hey, we were able to get something done on infrastructure? Would there be any kind of movement from the Democratic side on an issue like this?
Well, there's going to be some resistance for sure, but we want to also consider the fact that the appropriations and even the money that's being funded or touted to be funded for, let's say, the wall. I think it was earlier this week where Trump was saying that he is going to push for the military to, in fact, pay for a wall, that for the entire campaign season, he said that Mexico was going to pay for the wall. So we are going to be able to go back, right before midterms and during the election cycle and say the infrastructure is not set up the way that Donald Trump positioned himself to do so. As far as DACA is concerned, we have a really serious issue with these dreamers here and trying to negotiate terms of what we're going to get in exchange for the DACA deal. That hasn't been the best situation for either side.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's another soundbite from President Trump earlier today talking about jobs.
Now wages are rising because more jobs are happening. And very important, just like we're going to have choice at the VA, we're going to have choice for these great people, you're going to also have choice with jobs.
All right, Tom, your thoughts on that obviously this was a speech about infrastructure, but could potentially an infrastructure plan really be a job booster?
Well, it certainly can, but I think he's also reminding the audience of how we have now almost record unemployment. I think the national unemployment rate's down in the low fours. Black unemployment is at one point the lowest ever recorded. He's reminding the American workers that his tax policy that the Democrats all voted against is actually helping hardworking Americans. And it's also driving some companies, because they're able now to repatriate their money back into the U.S. to then invest in the U.S., grow jobs, and that's really what's important. And I think most people are not really political. What they really want to do is they care about their family and their future. And the more money you get, the more people employed, it's going to make many more Americans happier. And I think that's the way they're going to vote.
Bren, I can tell you wanted to respond to that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let me interject there. With respect to the black unemployment rates, I mean, these are things that Donald Trump has habitually wanted to take credit for. I spoke about this earlier in the year when the numbers came out, but President Obama is really to be credited for the superior low numbers that we're seeing with black unemployment specifically. I don't know where it is that Donald Trump and the administration wants to continuously take credit for that. Will it help the economy overall? Absolutely. I'm not taking that away from the existing presidency or the efforts that are being made to lower unemployment, but to constantly take credit where other presidencies and other administrations have really led and ushered the way for these low numbers, I think it's a problem. As I think, Tom, you were saying something about, I totally lost my mind there. Something about the, was it Iowa you mentioned? The worker in Iowa, you blanked out there on me.
No, I just mentioned that overall unemployment is going down. More people are employed. Wages are going up. People are getting bonuses. There's over 400 companies that have announced either bonuses or increased in wages and even health benefit or some sort of benefit. So it's all great for the American worker. I don't see what's the complaint about.
Well, the tax bill is a problem because it extends the ability for corporate taxes and corporate companies rather to take advantage over, I think, is a 25 or almost even endless situation where you and I will, the benefits of, I think it was a 3% increase will die out by 2025. So I don't know where the equity is there with long-term benefits that the tax reform is offering us. It's going to impact folks at the booths come November.
Right. Okay. Well, of course, a lot to watch play out this year for sure. I want to switch gears here and talk to you both about the latest firing in the Trump administration. That's VA Secretary David Shulkin. This didn't come as a big surprise, and veterans groups had said he was becoming a distraction. That was their words. First of all, Tom, how important is this position to, say, compared to the Secretary of State, for example?
Well, each cabinet secretary is really important, but really, it's really obviously our veterans should really be at the top of the list. And as we know, under former President Obama, the Veterans Administration was an absolute disaster. We had these long waiting lines, and actually veterans died. So President Trump has done a great job initially picking Dr. Shulkin to run the show. But now President Trump is really, I think, after a year, he knows where he wants to go, and he wants his team there that will take them there. Dr. Shulkin wasn't a big fan of putting more privatization in the Veterans Department, and I think that's where we're going to be seeing it move, which would be better because we know anything really run by the government really doesn't work that well, and the Veterans Affairs Department is a great example of that.
Yeah, Bren, I want you to respond to the op-ed that Shulkin wrote in the New York Times. He said, in recent months, the environment in Washington has turned so toxic, chaotic, disrespectful, and subversive that it became impossible for me to accomplish the important work that our veterans need and deserve. And of course, this is what Rex Tillerson had to say when he was leaving as Secretary of State. Let's listen.
I'd like to ask that each of you undertake to ensure one act of kindness each day towards another person. This can be a very mean-spirited town.
All right, so with the words from both of those parting secretaries, just how awful is Washington? Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, has it become worse under President Trump? In your view, I would probably imagine that question is yes, but it seems like people have been fed up with this town for decades now.
Yeah, I mean, there is no question on either side of the aisle. I don't think that's a partisan issue where we feel that the situation, the culture is very toxic here in D.C. I'm on Rhode Island Avenue, and it's almost palpable to see and feel the energy here. You have a tremendous, actually not even almost, an unprecedented turnover rate at the White House. It seems like every day we're finding out that 2-3 people are either being fired via Twitter, which is, again, unprecedented, and or leaving the White House because they've got some stuff coming down the pipeline and they know that trouble is ahead of them. So yeah, the temperature here is not exciting. It is toxic, and I'm not surprised to hear Tillerson have said that, yeah, there can be some really mean-spirited people in here. When you're driven by PACs or you're trying to get your agenda pushed forward, you are going to find some whistleblowers. You're going to find some fighting, some, apple throwing between the aisles to get your message across. But the situation here is, in fact, not amenable. And for Trump, very standard Trumpism for him to fire the Secretary of Veteran Affairs over Twitter. I don't know why we're surprised at this point. Are we disappointed? Absolutely. I mean, he spends more time calling Roseanne. I'm sure that we'll get to that, but he's taking time out of his really busy day, and instead of trying to keep people in the office, he's calling celebrities and congratulating them.
Right. So the person, of course, who's replacing Shulkin, or if he gets confirmed, would be Trump's personal doctor. That's Admiral Jackson. A lot of people commenting on Newsmax's social media sites for and against. Want to read one here that's tough on the decision, saying, you would expect with the problems at the VA, Trump would appoint a veteran administrator and troubleshooter, but instead he appoints the doctor that publicly gave him an overenthusiastic health report on his last checkup. Basically, he seems like another yes, sir kind of guy. Okay, so Tom, to you, is it fair for the public to be worried about what this commentator just mentioned, or in your view, is Admiral Jackson a good pick?
No, listen, I'm a huge fan of the First Amendment. That's why we're all here. So people are surely free to fire away on Twitter. But again, at the end of the day, it's the results that are going to matter. And when it comes to Dr. Shulkin, he just wasn't on board with where President Trump wanted to bring the Veterans Administration. And he is the president of the executive branch. So he gets to set the direction for all his direct reports. I don't see a problem with that.
Right. All right. Well, thank you both. Go ahead, Bren. Yeah, quickly.
I was
Bren,
say,
quickly, 10 seconds.
When you've got a presidency that's not adhering to the standard of government affairs and doesn't really understand how government works, otherwise he would be able to hire counsel in defense of whatever's going on. I don't know that criticizing the outgoing Veterans Affairs Secretary for his inability. Yeah.
All right. Well, Bren and Tom, a lot more from both of you. You're here all hour. Thank you so much. We'll be back with more news after the break.